Close your eyes and let the day slip quietly into the background, as though it were a garment you are folding away at the end of a long journey. The noises of your surroundings, the clutter of your thoughts, the weight of what has already passed, let all of it soften into distance. Feel the way your breath becomes the only rhythm you need, rising gently as though it were the swelling of calm waters, and falling again like the tide receding from a silent shore. With each inhale, you are gathering serenity. With each exhale, you are releasing what no longer needs to remain. This is the threshold of rest, the place where stories can cradle you into sleep. Tonight, the story waiting to accompany you comes from a land so old that its memory reaches further back than the pages of most histories, further even than the oldest legends written down by human hands. It is the story of Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, the Tigris swift and strong, and the Euphrates broad and patient. Here, long before marble temples or golden crowns, before empires that marched across continents, the first great steps of civilization were taken. Villages became towns, towns became cities, and in those cities people began to weave the fabric of what we call history. They did not know they were creating civilization. They only knew they had found a home. Allow the images to rise slowly in your imagination, not rushing, not straining. Picture a plain stretching endlessly to the horizon, the sky painted in the pale glow of dawn. The rivers breathe life into this valley, carrying silt, carrying stories, carrying dreams. The floods that once seemed fierce and unpredictable now bring fertility, a dark, rich soil where barley and wheat rise tall, where sheep and goats graze under the guidance of shepherds. In this soil, humanity's roots deepen. In these waters, reflection stirs. And as you drift with this vision, remember, you do not need to hold every word. The story is here to surround you, not to demand your attention. If you wish, you may listen closely, tracing the details of clay tablets and temple walls, or you may simply let the voice fade into the background, like wind weaving through reeds, a sound that comforts without asking anything of you. If sleep arrives, let it take you. The story will remain, flowing gently around your dreams, as constant as the rivers themselves. Before we travel deeper into this ancient land, I would like to pause softly, to invite you to join this journey not just tonight, but again and again. If these calm narratives help you relax, I kindly ask you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. It ensures that each new story, each new night of gentle history, can reach you with ease. If you are still awake as you listen, press the like button as well. It is a small act, yet it helps this quiet corner of the internet grow, reaching others who long for peaceful nights. And if you feel moved to share, leave a comment. Perhaps tell us how far into the story you wandered before dreams gathered you, or simply write "still listening" so we know you are here, resting alongside us. These gestures, small though they may seem, are like lanterns placed along the path, guiding this channel forward into more nights of peace. Now, return with me to the land itself. Imagine the air, warm, yes, but softened by the whisper of wind drifting from distant mountains. Imagine the colors of the horizon shifting as dawn becomes morning, pale gold deepening into soft blue, shadows stretching long across the plain. The reeds by the riverside bend gently, shimmering with dew, while the first birds rise into the sky, their wings catching the light. Somewhere in the distance, the voice of a shepherd calls, guiding his flock to water. These are not the moments of great kings or monumental wars. These are the first moments of settled life, where rhythm replaces wandering, where permanence emerges from the endless movement of generations. The Tigris and Euphrates are more than rivers. They are teachers, shaping the people who live by them. The Tigris rushes quickly, demanding respect, while the Euphrates flows broad and steady, a patient guardian. Between them, the land learns balance, strength and stillness, urgency and calm. In this balance, humanity learns its first great lessons: how to plant, how to harvest, how to store, how to hope. The land becomes not just a place to survive, but a place to imagine. And so, here at the beginning of our journey, let the sound of these waters become the rhythm of your own rest. Breathe with the rivers. Inhale with the swelling of the flood. Exhale with the gentle recession of the tide. Let your body sink into comfort, as though it were sinking into the soft earth left behind by the waters. Let your mind drift like a reed upon the current, carried forward by forces older and stronger than yourself. In this drifting, you are safe. In this drifting, you are home. This is Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, the cradle of civilization. And tonight it is also your cradle of sleep. Rest in its story, trust in its flow, and know that we have all night to wander through its valleys and its cities, its myths and its memories. There is no need to hurry. The story, like the rivers, will carry you at its own gentle pace. Block 2. The fertile valley before cities. Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of time itself, looking out over a landscape that feels both familiar and utterly untouched by the noise of the modern world. There are no towers of glass, no hum of machines, no glow of artificial light. What you see is Earth in its purest form, vast plains stretching endlessly, rivers winding like silver threads across a fabric of green and brown, the horizon softened by morning haze. The world is quiet, except for the gentle pulse of water and the occasional call of a bird lifting into the air. This is Mesopotamia before the cities, before the monuments, before the weight of kings and empires pressed their stories into stone. Here life moves in cycles that are as dependable as breath itself. The rivers swell in spring, bringing floods that might frighten at first, but soon reveal their generosity as the waters recede, leaving behind fields darkened by fertile silt. This soil is not ordinary soil. It is rich, dense, almost sacred in the way it responds to seed. A handful of barley grains pressed gently into the earth will rise in abundance when the sun warms the valley. Wheat, too, finds a home here, bending softly in fields that sway like waves beneath the breeze. What once was wilderness becomes a garden, tended not by kings but by families, by people whose names are long forgotten, yet whose quiet labor gave rise to everything we now know as settled life. Picture them at dawn, men and women stepping barefoot into fields still damp with dew, carrying baskets woven from reeds, their faces calm with routine. They are not in a hurry. There is no clock to chase them, no distant empire demanding tribute. There is only the rhythm of the land, the steady need of crops to be planted, watered, and harvested. Children run along the riverbank, their laughter mixing with the calls of herons lifting into the sky. Sheep and goats graze at the edges, tended by watchful eyes. The sound of animals blends with the murmur of water, creating a music that needs no composer, a harmony as old as time itself. In this valley, humanity's relationship with the earth changes forever. No longer do people drift endlessly, searching for food in one place and then another. The rivers give them reason to stay, to build, to imagine permanence. Simple huts of mud and reed rise close to the water, clustered together for warmth and safety. Fire burns softly in hearths, smoke rising into the cool night air. Meals are shared not just to satisfy hunger, but to bind people together. The idea of community takes form here, in the fertile valley where nature itself seems to whisper, "Stay." And as these first settlements take root, Another change stirs quietly within the human spirit. With stability comes memory. With memory comes story. Around fires at night, under skies thick with stars, the people begin to speak of the world in ways that reach beyond survival. They tell of spirits in the waters, of gods in the sky, of forces unseen that must be respected and honored. Their words shape belief, and belief shapes culture. In the silence of the plains, voices rise, giving birth to myths that will endure for thousands of years. Now, as you listen, imagine yourself not as an outsider, but as part of this world. Picture sitting by the riverbank, your feet in the cool water, watching the sun slip gently toward the horizon. The sky is painted with strokes of gold and rose, the first stars flickering faintly above. The air is still warm, but it carries the scent of wet earth, a reminder of the floods that made this valley abundant. Behind you, the laughter of children fades as families settle into their huts. The crackle of fire begins, and with it the hum of voices telling stories that stretch into the night. You feel safe here, part of a rhythm that is larger than yourself, a rhythm that promises rest. The fertile valley is more than a place of crops and settlements. It is the stage upon which humanity first learns the art of patience, the art of waiting, the art of trusting that what is sown will grow. It is here that the seasons become teachers: spring floods, summer harvests, autumn gatherings, winter stillness. Each season flows into the next like verses of a poem, unhurried, repeating, eternal. And as the people live within this cycle, they begin to see time itself differently, not as something to chase, but as something to rest within. Let your own body follow that cycle now. As you breathe in, think of seeds pressed gently into the dark earth, waiting. As you breathe out, think of the harvest swaying in the breeze, golden and full. Inhale the patience of planting. Exhale the peace of gathering. With each breath, you become more deeply connected to the rhythm of this ancient land, and with each breath, you sink more fully into the rest it offers. Though no cities rise here yet, though no ziggurats pierce the sky, the foundations are already being laid. Every grain harvested, every hearth lit, every story told is a stone in the building of something greater. Civilization does not begin with walls or kings. It begins here, in the quiet labor of unknown people, in the fertile valley where life becomes more than survival. These are the true architects of history, the men and women whose hands shaped clay, whose feet pressed paths into the earth, whose voices carried belief into the night. And so as you drift deeper into rest, let yourself imagine that you are lying down among them, wrapped in the warmth of a simple woven blanket, listening to the river's murmur and the soft rise and fall of voices around the fire. You do not need to worry about tomorrow. The crops will grow, the rivers will flow, the stars will return. All is steady, all is calm. Sleep, like history, will come in its own time, carrying you gently forward. This is the fertile valley before cities, a land of beginnings, a land where humanity first learned to stay, to dream, and to belong. Rest within it now, knowing that the story will continue, unbroken, as the night deepens and the rivers flow on. Block 3, the first cities of Sumer. The fertile valley, with its endless cycles of planting and harvest, slowly gave humanity the courage to dream of something greater than clusters of huts or gatherings of families by the riverside. From that steady rhythm, from that dependable soil, the first true cities began to emerge, rising not in haste but with the patience of generations. These cities were the beating heart of what would one day be called Sumer, and though their names might seem distant and ancient to us, Uruk or Lagash Eridu, they were once vibrant places where people lived, worked, prayed, and dreamed. Picture Uruk, one of the earliest and most extraordinary of these cities. At first, it may not seem like the kind of city we imagine today, with its crowded streets and towering structures. Yet for its time, it was immense, a place where tens of thousands of people lived together, sharing walls, pathways, and markets. Its boundaries stretched wide across the plain, encircled eventually by great walls said to be built by the legendary King Gilgamesh. Within those walls, life unfolded in patterns both ordinary and sacred. Imagine walking slowly through the streets of Uruk. The ground beneath your feet is hard-packed clay, warm from the sun. Around you rise mud brick houses, their walls pale and sun-baked, with doorways that open into courtyards shaded by woven mats. The scent of baking bread drifts through the air, mixed with the earthy smell of clay and the faint sweetness of fermenting grain. People move calmly through the streets. Merchants carrying baskets of dates, potters shaping clay, scribes with tablets tucked under their arms, children darting through alleys in laughter. It is not noisy in the way modern cities are. There is no roar of engines or blare of horns. Instead, the sounds are softer, closer to the rhythm of nature, footsteps, voices, the bleating of goats, the whisper of wind against reed roofs. At the heart of the city stands something remarkable: the temple complex, the ziggurat rising above the rooftops like a mountain shaped by human hands. Layer upon layer of mud brick, stacked with care and precision, climb toward the sky, a staircase for mortals to reach the realm of the gods. The people of Sumer believed that these towering structures connected heaven and earth, binding them to the divine powers who controlled fertility, weather, and destiny itself. To approach the ziggurat is to feel awe, not just for the structure but for what it represents. Humanity's first attempt to anchor the divine in stone. Priests move quietly within the complex, offering food, pouring libations, burning incense, all to honor the gods who were believed to dwell within these sacred places. In the markets below, life hums with energy. Farmers bring their produce from the countryside, baskets filled with barley, wheat, onions, and herbs. Fishermen lay out their catches from the river, shimmering in the sun. Craftsmen display pottery etched with intricate patterns, jewelry made of shells and lapis lazuli, tools of bronze that glint faintly as though holding the fire from which they were forged. The exchange of goods is more than survival. It is the lifeblood of the city, a constant weaving of relationships that connect one household to another, one quarter of the city to the next. And among these exchanges, another quiet revolution is taking place: the use of writing. In Sumer, the invention of cuneiform begins to transform life. At first it is simple, marks pressed into clay to count grain or record debts. But soon it becomes something larger, a way to preserve memory, to tell stories, to give permanence to words that would otherwise vanish like breath. Imagine a scribe sitting in the shade, pressing a reed stylus into a damp clay tablet, each wedge-shaped mark carrying meaning. These small tablets, stored carefully in baskets or shelves, are the first archives of humanity, the first attempt to hold on to thought across time. With them, cities gain not only walls and temples, but memory itself. Yet the city is not only about trade, temples, and writing. It is also about the simple fabric of daily life. Imagine the quiet of an evening in Uruk, when the sun lowers and the air cools. Families gather in their courtyards, sharing meals of bread, cheese, dates, and beer brewed from barley. The laughter of children softens into drowsiness, and stories are told of gods and heroes, of floods and kings, of the great mysteries of existence. The city, alive with activity by day, becomes calm by night, a cradle of human life beneath a canopy of stars. Fires flicker softly, voices fall, and sleep spreads through the streets like a gentle tide. The first cities of Sumer are not perfect. They are filled with challenges. floods that could destroy fields, conflicts between neighbors, the weight of labor demanded by both gods and rulers. Yet within these challenges lies resilience. The people of Uruk, Ur, and Lagash learned to organize themselves, to share resources, to build structures that endure. They learned to plan for the future, to balance the needs of the community with the hopes of individuals. These lessons, simple yet profound, echo down through the centuries, forming the foundation of how human beings still live together in cities today. As you drift with this story, let yourself imagine walking through those ancient streets once more. Feel the warmth of the clay beneath your feet. Hear the gentle murmur of voices around you. See the rising temple reaching toward the heavens. You are not in a rush. You have all the time you need. The city is alive, but it does not demand urgency. Its rhythm is steady, its pace unhurried. Like the rivers that cradle it, the city flows in cycles, drawing you into its calm. Now, as your breathing slows, imagine lying in the courtyard of a Sumerian home. The roof is open to the sky, the air still warm but touched with coolness from the night. You look upward, seeing constellations that the people of this land also saw, patterns of stars that guided their myths and their calendars. The sounds of the city are fading into quiet, a dog barking faintly in the distance, the last voices of neighbors saying goodnight, the steady hush of the river nearby. Sleep comes easily here, as it did for those who lived thousands of years ago, wrapped in the safety of walls, embraced by the presence of community. The first cities of Sumer are not only a beginning of civilization, they are a beginning of human dreaming. They show what is possible when people stay, when they build together, when they believe in something greater than themselves. And as you rest now, drifting deeper into your own dreams, you can feel a connection to those ancient dreamers. Their hopes, their labors, their stories, though distant, still whisper across time, carrying you gently into the night. Block 4. The Invention of Writing. In the quiet shade of a courtyard in Sumer, a man sits before a lump of damp clay. The air around him hums with the soft rhythm of daily life, the distant call of merchants in the market, the bleating of goats, the faint trickle of water carried in clay jars from the river. He holds in his hand a reed cut to a fine edge. With slow and careful pressure, he presses its tip into the clay, leaving behind a mark that resembles the wedge of an arrowhead. He pauses, breathes, and presses again. Another wedge, then another. The marks align in rows, steady and precise, forming a pattern that only the trained can read. This is cuneiform, the earliest system of writing, and it is being born in this very moment. The invention of writing is not dramatic like the fall of a city or the rise of an empire. It does not shake the earth or split the sky. Instead, it unfolds quietly in workshops and temples, in storerooms and fields. It begins with the simple need to remember. Grain has been harvested, debts are owed, offerings must be accounted for. Words spoken can fade like smoke in the air, but marks pressed into clay endure. They remain when memory falters, when voices fall silent, when years pass. Writing begins as an answer to the most human of needs, to hold on to what would otherwise be lost. Imagine now a temple storehouse in Uruk. The walls are lined with baskets filled with grain, jars of oil, bundles of reeds. Priests oversee the flow of goods, ensuring that offerings to the gods are recorded properly. Scribes sit nearby, tablets of clay before them. With their reeds they inscribe every detail, the number of measures of barley delivered, the names of those who brought them, the shares distributed to workers. Each mark is small, almost fragile, but together they weave a system of order that holds the city together. Without writing, memory might falter, disputes might grow, trust might wither. With writing, there is permanence, a foundation upon which law, trade, and history itself can rest. At first, the symbols are simple, little more than pictures. A drawing of a jar for oil, a stalk of grain for barley, a fish for the catch brought from the river. But as time passes, these drawings become stylized, reduced to their essential shapes. The reed stylus does not lend itself to curves, so the symbols become wedges, straight lines pressed at angles, efficient and uniform. Soon the pictures are no longer merely pictures. They stand not just for objects, but for sounds, for syllables, for words. In this transformation, humanity discovers something extraordinary, the ability to represent not just things, but thought itself. Picture a scribe in training, a young student sitting in the dust with a tablet balanced on his knees. His teacher dictates, reciting numbers and words, while the student struggles to keep up, his reed slipping, his hand unsteady. The clay shows his mistakes, lines pressed too deeply, symbols malformed. But with patience and repetition, his hand grows steadier, his mind sharper. He learns to turn spoken sound into silent mark, to capture fleeting breath and hold it forever in clay. For him, this is not just labor, but initiation, entry into a sacred craft. To write is to wield power, the power to preserve, to command, to shape the future. As writing spreads, its uses expand. Kings discover that decrees written on tablets can outlast their voices, commanding loyalty even after they are gone. Merchants find that contracts can bind agreements more tightly than memory ever could. Priests record hymns and rituals, ensuring that the words spoken to the gods are remembered exactly, without error or omission. And beyond all these practical uses, something even greater emerges: the telling of stories. With writing, myths that once drifted in the air around fires can now be etched into permanence. The tales of gods and heroes, of creation and flood, of Gilgamesh and his quest for immortality. All of these can survive the passing of generations, reaching us even now, thousands of years later. Imagine holding one of these ancient tablets in your hands. It is small, no larger than a handspan, its surface covered with neat rows of wedges. The clay is hard now, baked by time, its edges chipped, its corners worn. Yet the marks remain, sharp and clear, as though the scribe pressed them only yesterday. In those marks lies a voice, carried across millennia. It speaks of harvests, of debts, of prayers, of kings. It speaks of people long gone, whose faces and names we will never know, but whose thoughts still echo in the shapes of these symbols. Writing is not just invention, it is connection, a bridge between past and present, between the living and the dead. As you listen, let your mind drift with this image. Think of words as rivers flowing endlessly, carrying meaning from one shore to another. Writing is the vessel that allows those words to travel further than voice alone could reach. Without it, memory is fragile, easily lost to silence. With it, memory becomes strong, enduring like stone. And yet, just like the rivers, writing flows gently, not demanding urgency, but inviting reflection. You need not grasp every detail. Let the thought of these clay tablets rest lightly in your imagination, like soft ripples on the surface of water. The invention of writing marks a turning point in human history, though those who first pressed marks into clay could not have known how vast its consequences would be. From their quiet work would grow laws, literature, science, philosophy, all the treasures of civilization. But for them it was simple, a way to keep track, to remember, to give form to thought. In their simplicity lies greatness. In their fragility lies strength. The wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform, pressed by hand into soft clay, would outlast empires carrying the voices of Sumer into the far reaches of time. Now, as you breathe slowly, let yourself imagine lying in a courtyard in Uruk, a clay tablet beside you, the air warm and still. Above, the stars shine, silent witnesses to the words being pressed into clay below. The voices of the city fade into the distance, leaving only the whisper of wind and the steady rhythm of your breath. You close your eyes, knowing that even as you drift into sleep, the words remain, captured forever, waiting to be read again. Writing holds them, just as sleep now holds you. This is the gift of the Sumerians, the invention of writing, a gift that has carried human thought across the ages. Rest in that gift now, knowing that every dream you enter tonight is part of the same great river of memory, flowing endlessly between the shores of time. Block 5, Mythology and the Cosmos. As the first cities of Sumer rose and the invention of writing gave permanence to memory, another layer of human life began to unfold. The shaping of myth, the weaving of the cosmos into stories that could explain the mysteries of existence. For the people of Mesopotamia, the rivers, the sky, the earth, and the very air around them were alive with unseen forces. To them, the world was not silent matter, but a living, breathing whole, filled with gods, spirits, and powers that demanded recognition. Their mythology was not a distant abstraction. It was woven into the rhythm of their daily lives, as essential as the bread they baked and the water they drew from the rivers. Imagine the night sky above Sumer, dark and immense, unpolluted by the glow of cities or machines. The stars shimmer in countless numbers, forming patterns that seem too deliberate to be accidents. Farmers, lying on their rooftops after long days in the fields, would gaze upward and see order written in the heavens. Priests, climbing the steps of ziggurats, would look to the constellations to divine the will of the gods. The sky was not empty. It was a canvas upon which destiny was written. The center of Sumerian belief stood the gods, each embodying a force of nature, each wielding power over some aspect of human life. Anu, the father of the gods, ruled the heavens, distant yet omnipresent. Enlil, god of wind and storms, was both bringer of fertility and destroyer of crops. Enki, god of wisdom and water, brought knowledge, invention, and the gifts of civilization. Inanna, goddess of love and war, embodied the dual forces of creation and destruction, passion and conflict. These deities were not abstract ideals, but beings who lived alongside humanity, intervening in their affairs, guiding or punishing, blessing or cursing. In the myths told by firelight and later pressed into clay, the cosmos itself is described as a fragile balance between order and chaos. In the beginning, they said, there was the primeval sea, a great expanse of water without form. From this sea arose the first gods, who quarreled and shaped and struggled until the heavens and the earth were divided. The land was drawn up from the waters, the sky stretched above, and the gods took their thrones. Humanity, too, was part of this story, created by the gods to relieve them of labor, to till the fields and offer worship. To the Sumerians, to live was to serve the gods, to honor them through ritual and sacrifice, to acknowledge their power in every aspect of existence. Picture a ritual at a temple in Ur. The ziggurat looms above, its stairways leading upward to a shrine where the god was believed to dwell. Priests move slowly, bearing offerings, bowls of grain, vessels of beer, cuts of meat from the herd. Incense drifts into the air, mingling with the scent of fire and oil. The crowd gathers below, their voices rising in chants and hymns, steady and repetitive, designed not to stir excitement but to maintain harmony with the divine. For them, these rituals are not mere symbols. They are necessary acts, the threads that hold the fabric of the cosmos together. Without them, the balance might falter, and chaos might return. The myths also shaped the cycles of time. Festivals aligned with the movements of the stars and the turning of the seasons. The flooding of the rivers was not just a natural event. It was seen as the will of the gods, a reminder of their power to give and to take. Each year, the New Year festival marked the renewal of creation itself. Through ritual reenactments, the people retold the stories of the gods' victories over chaos, ensuring that order would continue for another year. In this way, mythology was not only explanation but participation. By telling and retelling the stories, by enacting them in song and offering, the Sumerians believed they were sustaining the cosmos itself. One of the most enduring of these myths is the story of Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, who sought immortality after the death of his friend Enkidu. In his journey, Gilgamesh confronts the limits of human life, the inevitability of death, and the eternal longing for meaning beyond the grave. Though centuries old, the story resonates with questions that remain with us still. It is more than legend. It is a mirror held up to the human heart, showing both its strength and its fragility. As you listen, let yourself imagine the atmosphere of a night in Sumer when such stories were told aloud. Families gather in courtyards, the glow of firelight softening the darkness. Children lean close, wide-eyed as elders recite the tales of gods and heroes. The voices rise and fall in a cadence that is both soothing and profound. Outside, the river murmurs, the reeds rustle, the stars look down. The boundary between myth and reality blurs. To the listener, the gods are not far away. They are present, moving in the wind, shining in the stars, guiding the rhythms of life. And so, in the first cities, the cosmos is never silent. The heavens speak through constellations. The earth speaks through floods and harvests. The gods speak through priests and omens. Humanity listens, responds, honors, and obeys. In this dialogue between mortal and divine, the shape of the world is sustained. Now let your breath fall into rhythm with this story, slow and unhurried. Inhale as the gods draw order from chaos. Exhale as they rest in their shrines. Inhale the vastness of the sky. Exhale the depth of the earth. Let the myths of the Sumerians surround you like a soft blanket, not demanding belief, not demanding effort, but offering comfort in their timelessness. You may not remember every name, every story, every ritual. That is not necessary. What matters is the sense of belonging to something greater, the assurance that for thousands of years, humanity has sought the same peace you seek now, the peace of knowing that the cosmos is not random but ordered, and that your place within it is secure. This is the mythology of Sumer, the weaving of the cosmos into story, the shaping of the divine into form. Rest now within its embrace, knowing that just as the stars continue their paths across the heavens, so too will this story continue, gently, carrying you deeper into sleep. Block 6, Akkad and Sargon. From the fertile plains of Sumer, where villages became cities and myths gave meaning to the cosmos, history soon turned toward something new, something larger, something that would forever change how humanity lived together. This was the rise of Akkad, the first true empire in recorded history, and at its heart stood a man whose name still echoes through the corridors of time, Sargon of Akkad. His story is not only one of conquest and ambition, but also a vision that sought to bind many lands, many peoples into one. Imagine for a moment that you are standing upon the walls of Akkad itself. The city is alive with movement, its streets filled with the murmur of languages drawn from faraway places. Merchants from distant lands bring their goods, copper from Oman, timber from Lebanon, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, silver from Anatolia. The empire stretches farther than any before it, reaching across rivers, mountains, and deserts, connecting cultures that had once been separated by distance and distrust. In Akkad, the world feels larger, yet also more closely woven together. Sargon's story begins humbly. Legends tell that he was found as an infant floating in a basket upon the river, much like the later tale of Moses. Raised by a humble gardener, he grew into a man of remarkable ability. Through cunning, strength, and determination, he rose from obscurity to power, eventually overthrowing the king of Kish and establishing himself as ruler. But Sargon was not content with one city, nor even one region. His vision was broader. He sought to unify all of Mesopotamia under a single rule. And so, with armies disciplined and loyal, he marched across the land, conquering city after city, until the banner of Akkad flew above them all. Picture the Akkadian army as it moves across the plains. Soldiers march in rows, their bronze weapons gleaming in the sun, their shields raised in unison. Chariots rumble across the earth, pulled by donkeys, their wheels leaving tracks in the dust. Standards bearing the symbols of Akkad rise above the troops, fluttering in the wind. Yet alongside the instruments of war are the signs of order. Scribes carrying tablets to record victories, officials ensuring that supplies are distributed, messengers riding swiftly to carry commands across great distances. This is not conquest for chaos's sake. It is conquest with the intention of building something lasting. Sargon's empire was more than a collection of lands. It was an experiment in governance. He appointed loyal officials to oversee conquered cities, often replacing local rulers with Akkadian governors. He established a centralized administration, ensuring that resources flowed to the heart of the empire. He maintained a standing army, ready to defend the borders or suppress rebellions. And, perhaps most importantly, he spread a common language, Akkadian, which became the lingua franca of trade, administration, and diplomacy across Mesopotamia. For the first time, people from distant regions could communicate more easily, bound together not just by force but by words. Yet the empire was not held together by governance alone. The mythology of Sargon himself became a powerful tool. Stories spread of his miraculous birth, his rise from obscurity, his favor with the goddess Ishtar. He was not merely a king. He was chosen, destined, protected by divine powers. Such stories gave legitimacy to his rule, weaving his personal journey into the larger fabric of cosmic order. For those who lived under his reign, obedience was not only political, but spiritual, an alignment with the will of the gods themselves. As you listen, let yourself imagine walking through the streets of Akkad at the height of its power. The air is filled with languages: Sumerian, Akkadian, Amorite, Elamite. Markets overflow with goods from faraway lands. The walls are strong, the palaces grand, the temples adorned with offerings to gods now honored across the empire. There is a sense of greatness, of being part of something vast, something larger than any single city or people. To live here is to feel both awe and humility, as though swept up into a tide far greater than oneself. But even as the empire flourished, shadows lingered. Conquest is never without resistance. Some cities resented Akkadian rule, longing for independence. Rebellions flared, requiring Sargon to march again and again to reassert his authority. The logistics of empire strained the resources of the land. Soldiers grew weary, officials corrupt, subjects restless. And though Sargon's rule lasted for decades, and his successors carried on his work, the empire eventually weakened, succumbing to the pressures of rebellion, invasion, and the relentless tide of history. Still, The legacy of Akkad endured. The idea of empire, of binding many lands and peoples under one rule, would echo throughout history, inspiring future kings and conquerors. The Akkadian language would remain the language of diplomacy and culture long after the empire itself had fallen. The memory of Sargon, the man who rose from nothing to rule everything, would persist for centuries, shaping the imagination of those who came after. As you rest now, let this story settle into your thoughts. Imagine lying beneath the stars, hearing the distant echo of marching feet, the clang of bronze, the murmur of voices in many tongues. The empire rises before your closed eyes, not as noise and chaos, but as a slow tide, steady and powerful, carrying with it the dreams of unity and greatness. You need not remember every detail, every name, every place. Let them drift past you like banners in the wind, like footprints in the dust, leaving only the sense of a vast world unfolding. Breathe deeply, as though inhaling the air of Akkad itself, filled with the scent of clay and fire, grain and incense. Exhale slowly, releasing the tension of your day, letting the empire of Sargon carry you into calm. For though empires rise and fall, though kings live and die, the stories endure, and tonight they are here to guide you gently into sleep. This is Akkad, the first empire, the dream of Sargon made real upon the plains of Mesopotamia. Rest within its story now, knowing that even as the empire fades into memory, the calm it brings to your night will endure until morning. Block 7, Ur 3 and Refined Administration. After the great tide of Akkad rose and fell, the land between the rivers did not fall silent. The empires of Mesopotamia were like the floods of the Tigris and Euphrates, powerful, often overwhelming, yet never permanent. In their wake, new life would always spring forth, new leaders would rise, and new structures of society would take shape. Out of the ruins of Akkadian dominance came the rise of a new dynasty, centered in the ancient Sumerian city of Ur. Historians call it the Third Dynasty of Ur, or simply Ur the Third. And though it lasted barely a century, it became one of the most remarkable experiments in administration and order that the ancient world had ever seen. Imagine standing before the great ziggurat of Ur, its massive terraces rising layer upon layer, glowing golden in the evening light. Built under the rule of King Ur-Nammu and his successors, this structure was more than just a temple. It was a symbol of the new order, a declaration that the gods still dwelled among the people, and that the rulers of Ur were their chosen representatives on earth. At its summit, priests offered sacrifices of grain, bread, beer, and animals, their chants echoing down the stairways. To the people who gathered in its shadow, the ziggurat was both a mountain and a bridge, connecting earth to heaven, mortals to the divine. But beyond its temples, Ur III was remarkable for its system of governance. Where Sargon had ruled through conquest and charisma, the kings of Ur sought to rule through administration and organization. They developed a bureaucracy so detailed, so carefully crafted, that thousands of clay tablets survive today bearing records of taxes, labor, rations, and trade. Imagine storerooms filled not with grain or goods, but with shelves of tablets, each one pressed with wedge-shaped marks detailing the flow of life across the empire. These were the archives of Ur, the heartbeat of a society that sought order above all. Picture a scribe at work in the city of Ur. He sits cross-legged on the floor, a damp tablet balanced on his knees, a reed stylus in his hand. Around him, other scribes murmur as they copy, calculate, and catalog. The room is quiet except for the faint scratching of reeds against clay, the occasional cough, the shuffle of sandals against the floor. Each scribe is a cog in a vast machine, recording the taxes collected from villages, the distribution of grain to laborers, the wages paid to craftsmen, the offerings presented to temples. In this way, the empire is not only governed by kings and generals, but by the steady hands of scribes who transform life into numbers, words, and marks. The kings of Ur III also sought to codify justice. The most famous example is the law code of Ur-Nammu, written centuries before the more well-known Code of Hammurabi. These laws, inscribed on tablets, laid out rules for marriage, trade, inheritance, and punishment. They were not merely proclamations of power. They were attempts to create fairness, to establish a sense of order that extended beyond the king's will. To live under these laws was to believe, however imperfectly, that life was not arbitrary, that justice had form and structure. Beyond the bureaucracy and the laws, Ur III also oversaw great building projects. Canals were dug and maintained, ensuring that water flowed to the fields even in dry seasons. Roads were laid across the plains, connecting distant cities and making trade easier. Temples were restored and expanded, their walls decorated with offerings to the gods. The empire's vision was not one of endless conquest, but of stability, prosperity, and continuity. It was an empire built not on the chaos of war, but on the quiet rhythm of administration. And yet, as with all human efforts, shadows lay beneath the surface. The bureaucracy that gave structure also demanded endless labor. Farmers and workers were conscripted into vast building projects, their sweat and effort feeding the ambitions of kings and priests. Taxes pressed heavily upon villages, and those who could not pay sometimes found themselves or their children sold into servitude. The ziggurats and canals, glorious though they were, came at a cost borne by countless ordinary lives. Still, those lives, recorded in clay tablets that endure even now, remind us that civilization is never only the story of rulers. It is also the story of those who worked quietly, anonymously, leaving behind traces in the form of numbers, lists, and tallies. Imagine lying on the rooftop of a house in Ur as night falls. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of baked clay and cooking fires. Below, the streets fall silent, merchants closing their stalls, children gathering near their parents. Above, the ziggurat glows in the starlight, its terraces illuminated by torches. Somewhere, a priest chants softly, his voice rising and falling like a lullaby to the gods. Around you, the city rests, its order preserved by thousands of unseen hands, scribes, workers, priests, guards. You close your eyes, knowing that though you may not see them, the mechanisms of the empire turn steadily, ensuring that tomorrow will resemble today, that stability will endure. The Ur III dynasty was not eternal. Like Akkad before it, it eventually crumbled under the weight of invasions, rebellions, and economic strain. The Elamites from the east pressed into its lands, weakening its hold. Internal divisions fractured its unity, and within a century of its rise, the great experiment in order and administration came to an end. But its memory remained, etched into clay, preserved for us to read thousands of years later. In its ambition to create order, to give life structure, Ur III left behind a legacy that still whispers through time. As you rest now, let yourself drift with the thought of this empire of scribes, laws, and ziggurats. It is not the clamor of armies or the roar of conquest that defines it, but the quiet scratching of reeds on clay, the slow rhythm of canals carrying water across fields, the steady pulse of administration shaping life into order. Inhale slowly, as though breathing in the calm of a city lulled into night. Exhale softly, releasing tension, as though handing your burdens over to the scribes who record and preserve all things. In this rhythm, you are safe, you are steady, you are part of a story that flows gently into sleep. This is Ur-3, the dynasty of order, the empire of refined administration, a moment in history when humanity sought not only to build, but to organize, not only to conquer, but to preserve. Rest within its memory now, as the rivers flow and the stars turn above, carrying you deeper into night. Block 8, Babylon and Hammurabi's Code. When the dynasty of Ur-3 faded into the sands of memory, the land between the rivers did not fall silent. The rivers continued to flow, the fields continued to yield their crops, and human communities continued to rise and fall with the rhythm of the seasons. In time, from the heart of Mesopotamia, another city began to gather strength, a city whose name would echo across the centuries with a resonance few others would match. That city was Babylon, and under the rule of its most famous king, Hammurabi, it became both a symbol of power and a cradle of law. Imagine approaching Babylon as a traveler in the early 2nd millennium before Christ. The air is warm and filled with dust, but on the horizon a city begins to shimmer into view. Its walls rise high above the plains, massive fortifications that promise both protection and authority. Within those walls, the streets are alive with markets, temples, workshops, and homes, all built around the steady pulse of the Euphrates River that runs through the city like a great artery of life. The water glitters in the sun, carrying boats laden with grain, wool, and clay jars filled with oil. The scent of bread baking mixes with the sound of merchants calling, children laughing, and donkeys braying as they carry loads of goods. Babylon is not simply a city. It is a crossroads, a gathering point of peoples, languages, and dreams. At the heart of this rising city stood Hammurabi, a king who reigned for more than 4 decades, and who understood that true power was not only won on the battlefield, but also preserved in the structures of law and justice. Like the kings of Ur before him, Hammurabi expanded his realm through both diplomacy and conquest, bringing neighboring cities and lands under Babylonian control. But his legacy was not just an empire of soil and stone. It was an empire of rules, an attempt to weave human life into a fabric of order, as enduring as the ziggurats themselves. Hammurabi is most remembered today for his code of laws, one of the earliest and most complete legal codes known to history. Picture, if you will, a great stone stele, tall and dark, its surface covered with rows upon rows of wedge-shaped inscriptions. At its summit, a carving shows Hammurabi standing before the god Shamash, the sun god and divine judge, receiving from him the authority to rule. Beneath this image are hundreds of laws, etched into stone so that all might see, so that justice would not be hidden in whispers but made visible for every citizen. The laws themselves cover every aspect of life: trade, agriculture, family, property, crime, and punishment. They are practical, concerned with the daily realities of a complex society. If a man damaged another man's house, there was a law to address it. If a merchant cheated in trade, there was a law for that. If disputes arose over inheritance, contracts, or wages, there was a law to bring resolution. Justice was no longer left solely to the decisions of rulers or priests. It was codified, fixed, and inscribed for all to know. The punishments by modern eyes may seem harsh. The principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, runs through the code, reflecting a desire for balance, that harm done should be repaid in kind. Yet within these laws is also a striving for fairness, a recognition that society cannot endure without order, that peace cannot be maintained without rules. For the people of Babylon, Hammurabi's code was both a shield and a guide, promising stability in a world that often seemed uncertain. Imagine a dispute unfolding in a marketplace of Babylon. Two merchants argue over the quality of grain delivered, voices rising above the din of trade. A scribe is called, a tablet produced, the laws consulted. The quarrel is not settled by strength of arm or loudness of voice, but by reference to a code that all acknowledge as binding. The decision is written down, the dispute resolved, and life continues. This was the brilliance of Hammurabi's vision, that law could bind society together more tightly than walls, more securely than armies. Yet Babylon under Hammurabi was not only about law. It was also a place of culture, worship, and daily life. The temples hummed with rituals, their walls adorned with carvings and offerings. The streets rang with music, flutes and drums played in festivals that honored the gods. Families gathered in courtyards at night to share meals of bread, dates, fish, and beer, telling stories beneath the canopy of stars. In this city, the practical and the spiritual intertwined seamlessly. The laws of Hammurabi were not only civic, they were sacred, rooted in the belief that justice itself flowed from the gods. Picture now, lying on the rooftop of a home in Babylon as evening falls. The heat of the day has lifted, and the cool night air brushes gently against your skin. The city hums with distant voices, but around you the world is settling into rest. Somewhere far off, the temple bells ring softly, marking the close of day. You look upward and see the stars, the same stars that guided farmers, merchants, and priests for countless generations. You feel the weight of the laws carved into stone, not as oppression, but as reassurance, a promise that life has order, that chaos is held at bay, that tomorrow will bring stability. Hammurabi's empire, like all before and after, would eventually wane. His successors could not hold the same unity, and the tides of history moved on. Yet his code endured, preserved in stone, carried across time, rediscovered millennia later. It remains a reminder that the human longing for justice, for fairness, for stability, is as old as civilization itself. As you drift deeper into rest, let the thought of Babylon surround you. Imagine the steady murmur of the Euphrates, the glow of torches on city walls, the carved stone stelae standing silently beneath the stars. Feel the calm of order, the reassurance of rules, the quiet strength of a society bound not only by power but by law. Inhale slowly, as though breathing in the certainty of Hammurabi's vision. Exhale gently, releasing the chaos of your own day. Rest in the knowledge that even in the earliest cities of history, humanity sought the same peace you seek now, the peace of order, the comfort of knowing that life flows within patterns that endure. This is Babylon under Hammurabi, a city of power, law, and life, a place where the dream of justice was carved into stone so it might outlast empires. Sleep now within its story, knowing that the laws of Hammurabi, though born in the dust of Mesopotamia, still whisper to us today of humanity's eternal desire for balance and peace. Block 9, Assyria, Empire of Learning and War. The story of Mesopotamia flows onward like the rivers themselves, never still, always shifting from one course to another. After the time of Hammurabi and the laws carved into stone, new powers rose, old cities waned, and the world between the Tigris and Euphrates entered yet another era. Out of the northern plains, where the land begins to lift toward hills and mountains, a people who had long lived in smaller cities began to gather strength. Their name would one day inspire both awe and fear across the ancient world, the Assyrians. For centuries they were known as fierce warriors, masters of conquest, builders of palaces and fortresses. Yet they were also preservers of knowledge, collectors of texts, students of the heavens. Their empire was built on both the sword and the stylus, on both the power of armies and the permanence of learning. Imagine traveling north along the Tigris River, where the land narrows and the hills rise. There you would find the cities that became the heart of Assyria. Ashur, the sacred city that gave the people their name. Nineveh, destined to become a great capital filled with palaces and gardens. Nimrud, adorned with statues of winged bulls guarding its gates. These were not sprawling like Babylon, but fortified, deliberate, and strong. Places built as much for defense as for grandeur. Their walls were high, their gates massive, their palaces filled with reliefs that told stories in stone. To step inside an Assyrian city was to feel the weight of discipline, the presence of authority, the impression that life here was ordered and exact. At the center of Assyrian power was the army, famed for its discipline and innovation. Picture lines of soldiers marching in unison, their armor gleaming in the sunlight, their bows strung tight, their spears raised like a forest of bronze. Chariots rolled beside them, pulled by swift horses carrying archers whose arrows could rain down upon enemies from a distance. Siege engines, massive towers and battering rams, were pushed against city walls, breaking down defenses once thought unbreachable. The Assyrians were relentless, their campaigns carefully planned, their logistics meticulously organized. To those who resisted, they brought terror. To those who submitted, they offered protection and order. And yet, alongside this fearsome power, the Assyrians cultivated learning. Their kings, especially Ashurbanipal of Nineveh, understood that conquest alone could not preserve greatness. Knowledge had to be gathered, written, and stored. In the palace of Nineveh, Ashurbanipal created one of the first great libraries of the world. Imagine walking through its halls, the walls lined with shelves, the shelves filled with thousands of clay tablets pressed with cuneiform script. Hymns, myths, medical texts, astronomical observations, dictionaries, histories, all gathered from across Mesopotamia and beyond. The story of Gilgamesh was preserved here, copied carefully by scribes, ensuring that the voice of ancient Uruk would not vanish. Even spells, omens, and incantations found their place, for the Assyrians believed that to understand the cosmos, one must preserve every fragment of knowledge, no matter how humble. Picture the scribes of Nineveh at work. They sit in quiet chambers, bent over damp clay tablets, their styluses tapping gently, rhythmically, like rain on soft earth. Each mark is deliberate, each row carefully aligned. Outside, the city hums with life. Soldiers training in the courtyards, merchants calling in the markets, priests chanting in temples. But within the library, there is only the silence of thought, the patience of preservation. It is as if the Assyrians who conquered with such ferocity also sought redemption in memory, in the act of ensuring that the wisdom of ages would never be lost. The art of Assyria also spoke of its dual nature. Reliefs carved into palace walls depict scenes of war, kings in chariots, enemies fleeing, cities burning. Yet these same reliefs also show the king hunting lions, a ritual act that symbolized both bravery and dominion over chaos. They show gardens lush with trees, canals, and fountains, designed to reflect the order the king imposed upon the land. They show the gods bestowing power, their hands raised in blessing, their presence ensuring legitimacy. To walk the halls of an Assyrian palace was to be surrounded by stories of power, of conquest, of divinity, and of control. Yet beneath this grandeur, life for ordinary Assyrians continued in quieter ways. Farmers still tilled their fields, drawing water from canals that branched from the Tigris. Shepherds led their flocks across the hills. Families gathered in their homes at night, eating bread, drinking beer, telling stories beneath the stars. Priests tended to the temples, offering sacrifices to Ashur, the chief god, and to the many deities who governed sky, earth, and water. In the rhythm of their days, the Assyrians were not so different from the Sumerians or Babylonians who came before them. What set them apart was the scale of their ambition and the relentlessness of their order. As you listen, imagine lying within the walls of Nineveh as evening falls. The sounds of the city begin to quiet. The torches are lit along the gates, their flames flickering against stone. The library grows silent as scribes set aside their tablets, their hands weary but their minds filled with the satisfaction of preservation. In the distance, the Tigris murmurs, flowing steadily as it has for millennia. You look upward, and the same stars that guided the Sumerians now shine above the Assyrians, their constellations interpreted by priests, their movements recorded in clay. The empire may be vast, the army fierce, but in this moment, all is still, all is calm, all is ordered beneath the night. The Assyrian Empire, like those before it, was not eternal. It grew powerful, expanded far beyond Mesopotamia, stretching into Egypt and Anatolia, dominating lands across the Near East. But empires are fragile, no matter how mighty their armies. Rebellions broke out, enemies united, and in time the Babylonians and Medes together struck the final blow, bringing Nineveh to ruins. The palaces crumbled, the armies fell, and the great Assyrian power became another chapter in the endless cycle of rise and fall. Yet even in its destruction, the library of Nineveh ensured that Assyria's memory would endure. The tablets survived, carrying forward the stories, laws, and knowledge of Mesopotamia to later ages. As you breathe slowly now, let this dual image settle in your thoughts. The relentless march of armies across the plains, and the quiet scratching of reeds on clay within the library walls. The Assyrians embodied both, the power of war and the persistence of learning. Inhale the strength of order, exhale the calm of preservation. You do not need to remember every king, every battle, every conquest. Let those details drift past you like banners in a parade. Hold instead the sense of continuity, of a people who sought to master not only the land but also the memory of humankind. This is Assyria, the empire of learning and war. A civilization that carved its power in stone yet also pressed its wisdom into clay. Rest now in its story, knowing that even in the mightiest empires, there is still silence, still calm, still the eternal flow of the rivers and the stars above. Block 10. Neo-Babylon and the Splendor of the Chaldeans. When the power of Assyria crumbled and the fires of Nineveh cooled into ash, it might have seemed that the story of Mesopotamia had reached its end. Yet history is never still, and the rivers do not cease their flow simply because empires fall. From the ruins of Assyrian might rose a city that had long been present, a city whose name carried echoes of ancient Hammurabi, a city that now stepped once again into greatness: Babylon. Under the leadership of the Chaldeans, and especially under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon became a place of such splendor, such magnificence, that it entered the imagination of the world, a symbol of wealth, power, and beauty. Imagine approaching Babylon in the days of its glory. From a distance, its walls seem almost impossible in scale, stretching for miles, thick and high, gleaming in the sun. Some said they were so wide that chariots could ride atop them side by side. The gates pierced those walls like jeweled openings, each one adorned with glazed bricks of deep blue, upon which marched golden lions, bulls, and dragons. The most famous of these, the Ishtar Gate, seemed to shimmer like a piece of the heavens brought down to earth, its colors radiant, its symbols fierce and protective. To pass through such a gate was to enter not just a city but another world, a place where human ambition reached toward the divine. Inside, Babylon unfolded in grand avenues and bustling markets. The Euphrates cut through its heart, spanned by bridges, lined with docks where boats unloaded goods from across the known world. Merchants called in many tongues, offering spices, fabrics, metals, and stone. The scent of incense drifted from temples, mingling with the aroma of food being prepared in homes and taverns. Music floated through the air, flutes, drums, and harps, carrying with it the sense that this was not only a city of power, but of culture, a place where life thrived in both grandeur and joy. At its center stood the towering ziggurat, often associated with the biblical Tower of Babel. Called Etemenanki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth, it rose like a stairway to the sky, its layers climbing higher and higher, visible from every corner of the city. Priests ascended its steps to perform rituals, believing that the gods descended upon its summit to bless the city. Around it stretched the Esagila temple, dedicated to Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, where ceremonies affirmed not only religious devotion, but the very legitimacy of the king himself. Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned for more than 40 years, poured his energy into making Babylon the jewel of the world. He expanded its walls, built its palaces, restored its temples, and filled it with gardens and canals. Under his rule, Babylon became not just a capital but a vision of what human hands guided by ambition and faith could create. And though much of its glory has faded with time, the memory of its beauty lingers, carried through stories and legends. Among those legends are the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the wonders of the ancient world. Though historians still debate their existence and exact form, the tales speak of terraces rising high above the ground, planted with trees, flowers, and vines, watered by ingenious systems that lifted water from the river below. Imagine standing in such a garden, the air filled with the fragrance of blossoms, the sound of water trickling through channels, the shade of trees sheltering you from the sun. From above, you would see the whole city spread out, its walls gleaming, its temples rising, its people moving like the pulse of a great organism. Whether myth or memory, the gardens embody the vision of Babylon as a city where Earth itself was reshaped into beauty. Yet Babylon was not only splendor, it was also a place of politics, conquest, and captivity. Under Nebuchadnezzar, the empire expanded, reaching into lands once ruled by Assyria. Jerusalem was taken, and its people carried into exile, a moment remembered in the Hebrew scriptures as the Babylonian captivity. For those exiles, Babylon was both a place of sorrow and wonder, a city whose magnificence could not erase the pain of displacement. The Psalms recall their lament. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept. Thus, Babylon entered not only the history of Mesopotamia, but the spiritual memory of peoples far beyond its borders. Still, for those who lived within its walls, Babylon was a place of extraordinary life. Families gathered in courtyards at night, sharing meals beneath the stars. Children played in the streets, their laughter echoing against the walls. Priests tended temples, merchants traded, scribes pressed tablets, and the city thrummed with the steady rhythm of daily existence. Even in its grandeur, Babylon was sustained by the ordinary. The bread baked each morning, the water drawn from the river, the stories told by firelight. As you listen, let yourself imagine lying within the walls of Babylon on a quiet evening. The air is warm, but a breeze drifts softly from the river, carrying the scent of water and stone. In the distance, the torches along the Ishtar gate flicker, their light shimmering against the blue and gold tiles. Music drifts faintly through the night, a flute, a drum, a voice singing softly in devotion. Above you, the ziggurat looms like a mountain, reaching into the sky, its steps glowing faintly beneath the starlight. Around you, the city is alive yet at peace. its splendor softened by the calm of night. And in this gentle moment, let me remind you once again, if these stories bring you peace, if they guide you into rest, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Your presence here helps this quiet corner continue to grow, bringing more nights of history told in whispers. If you are still awake, press the like button, a small gesture that carries great weight, helping these stories reach others who long for rest. And perhaps leave a comment below, telling us if Babylon carried you into dreams, or simply writing "still listening" so we know you are with us. These signs of connection, simple though they are, keep this journey alive, linking us across nights and across time. The Neo-Babylonian Empire did not last forever. After Nebuchadnezzar's reign, the city struggled with succession and unrest. Within decades, a new power, the Persians under Cyrus the Great, would rise and take the city, absorbing it into yet another empire. The grandeur of Babylon dimmed, its gardens fell silent, its walls crumbled with age. Yet its name lived on, immortalized in stories, in scriptures, in legends that turned it into more than a city. Babylon became a symbol of power, of beauty, of pride, of longing, a symbol so strong that even today, to say Babylon is to evoke more than a place, but an idea. As you drift deeper into rest, let the image of Babylon settle softly in your mind. Picture the Ishtar Gate glowing in torchlight, the ziggurat rising into the stars, the gardens blooming high above the streets. Hear the murmur of the river, the distant music, the hush of voices settling into sleep. You are within the walls of the great city, not as a stranger, but as one who belongs, resting in its calm, embraced by its splendor. Inhale slowly, as though breathing in the fragrance of blossoms. Exhale gently, as though releasing the burdens of the day. Let Babylon hold you now, a cradle of dreams, a memory of greatness, a lullaby of stone and water. This is Neo-Babylon, the splendor of the Chaldeans, the jewel of Mesopotamia reborn. Rest within its story tonight, knowing that though empires pass, the calm of their memory remains, flowing like the eternal rivers beneath the stars. Block 11, the Persians and the great satrapies. The rivers flowed on as they always did, even when Babylon's golden gates began to lose their luster and its gardens faded into legend. Empires rose and fell upon the Mesopotamian plain, yet the land itself endured, waiting for the next tide of power to arrive. That tide came from beyond the Zagros Mountains, from the vast plateaus and valleys of Persia. It was there that a new vision of empire was born, one that would not only conquer, but also unite, not only expand, but also endure. This was the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great and his successors, and its genius lay not just in armies, but in administration, tolerance, and the creation of a world bound together by order and roads. Imagine, if you will, the approach of the Persian army as it entered Babylon in the year 539 BCE. There was no chaos, no burning of temples, no slaughter of citizens. Instead, Cyrus the Great entered the city with calm dignity, declaring respect for Babylon's gods, for its traditions, for its people. The conqueror did not come as a destroyer, but as a restorer, presenting himself as chosen by Marduk, Babylon's own chief deity. To the people of Babylon, weary of decline and unrest, this was not conquest but deliverance. Cyrus understood that empires endure not through fear alone, but through the trust and consent of those they rule. The genius of the Persians was their system of satrapies, provinces overseen by governors known as satraps. Imagine a map spread before you, the empire stretching from the Indus Valley in the east to the shores of the Mediterranean in the west. From the mountains of Central Asia to the deserts of Egypt, each region was distinct, with its own languages, religions, and customs. Yet under the satrapies, all were bound together into one empire, unified by a system of tribute, law, and communication. The satraps oversaw justice, collected taxes, and maintained order, reporting back to the great king who sat upon his throne at Persepolis or Susa. Picture the roads that stretched across this vast empire. The most famous of them, the Royal Road, ran for more than 1,500 miles, linking Susa in Persia to Sardis near the Aegean Sea. Along its length, stations were built where riders could rest and change horses, allowing messages to travel with astonishing speed. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night prevents these couriers from completing their appointed course with all speed, wrote Herodotus of the Persian messengers. Imagine the hoofbeats of horses echoing through the night, carrying commands, decrees, and news from one end of the empire to the other. In a world where distance once meant isolation, the Persians created connection. The Persians also practiced a degree of tolerance unusual for their time. They allowed conquered peoples to maintain their gods, their traditions, their local leaders, as long as they remained loyal and paid tribute. For the Jewish exiles in Babylon, this brought freedom. Cyrus issued a decree allowing them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, an act remembered with gratitude in the Hebrew scriptures. For others too, Persian rule meant stability rather than suppression, continuity rather than destruction. At the heart of the Persian vision stood their religion, Zoroastrianism, which taught that the world was a battleground between truth and falsehood, light and darkness, Ahura Mazda, and the forces of evil. Though the empire embraced many gods and tolerated many faiths, this vision of cosmic struggle infused the Persian worldview, shaping their sense of justice, their administration, their understanding of kingship. The great king ruled not only as a conqueror, but as the guardian of order against chaos, of truth against lies. Imagine standing in Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the empire, with its grand stairways carved with images of subjects from across the world bringing tribute. Medes, Egyptians, Indians, Greeks, Babylonians, each carrying gifts symbolic of their lands. The walls rise high, adorned with reliefs of soldiers, animals, and mythical beings. The air is filled with the scent of incense and the sound of drums as envoys present their offerings before the king. To witness such a ceremony is to feel the immensity of the empire, the sense that all the world has gathered here, bound together beneath the gaze of the great king. And yet beyond the grandeur, life for ordinary people continued much as it always had. Farmers tended fields along the rivers, craftsmen shaped pottery and tools, families gathered at night to eat bread, drink wine, and tell stories beneath the stars. The Persian Empire was vast, but it was also composed of countless ordinary lives, each one carrying the rhythm of birth, work, love, and rest. The satrapies provided stability, but it was the daily efforts of these countless men and women that sustained the empire. As you listen, let yourself imagine lying beneath the Persian night sky. The stars shine above you with a brilliance untouched by smoke or cities. The air is cool, carrying the scent of earth and fire. In the distance, you hear the faint sound of a rider's horse along the royal road, carrying a message from one end of the empire to the other. You close your eyes, and in that sound you feel both the vastness of the empire and the intimacy of your own rest. You are small within it, yet not lost, for the empire itself promises order, stability, and peace. And in this gentle moment, allow me to pause and remind you, if this story has carried you softly into calm, if the voice of history soothes you into rest, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button as a sign of your presence, helping this quiet space reach others who need it. And if you are still awake, leave a comment. Perhaps share how far into the Persian Empire your dreams began, or simply write, "Still listening," so we know you are with us. These small gestures bind us together, like the satrapies of old, weaving a community across distance and time. The Persian Empire, like those before it, would one day falter. It would face the challenge of the Greeks, the rise of Alexander, the shifting tides of power. Yet for 2 centuries, it provided a model of governance, a vision of unity, a system of roads, satrapies, and tolerance that shaped not only Mesopotamia, but the world beyond. Its memory endures, not as a fleeting conquest, but as a structure of order, a reminder that empires can be built not only on force, but on respect and vision. As you drift deeper into rest, let the thought of Persia surround you. Imagine the royal road stretching endlessly, the couriers galloping beneath the stars, the reliefs of Persepolis glowing in torchlight, the great king seated calmly upon his throne. Inhale slowly, as though breathing in the vastness of the empire. Exhale gently, releasing the burdens of your day. Rest now within the story of the Persians, the guardians of order, the builders of satrapies, the visionaries of unity. This is Persia, the empire that bound the world together with roads, laws, and trust. Sleep within its story tonight, knowing that even as empires pass, the calm of their memory endures, flowing like rivers beneath the eternal stars. Block 12, Daily Life in Mesopotamia. So far, our journey has wandered through empires and dynasties, through kings and conquerors, through libraries and laws carved into stone. Yet the deeper truth of Mesopotamia, the truth that sustained all of its grandeur, was found not in palaces or armies, but in the daily lives of the people. The clay tablets that survive tell us not only of kings, but of bakers and brewers, shepherds and scribes, potters and priests. Beneath the towering ziggurats, and within the shadow of city walls, the rhythm of life was carried forward by men and women whose names are lost, but whose ordinary actions formed the true heartbeat of civilization. Imagine waking at dawn in the city of Ur. The air is cool, the streets quiet except for the distant sound of roosters and the faint murmur of the river. Families rise from simple mats laid upon the floor of mud brick houses. A small fire is kindled in the courtyard, and bread is baked upon hot stones, its aroma filling the morning air. Children rub sleep from their eyes, their laughter beginning the day as they chase one another through narrow lanes. The hum of the city begins softly, building like a chorus as more households stir awake. In the fields beyond the city walls, farmers tend to their crops. The soil, enriched by the floods, is dark and fertile. Barley is the most common grain, and it will become bread, beer, and porridge. Wheat is planted too, along with onions, lentils, dates, cucumbers, and herbs. Oxen pull wooden plows, their slow strength breaking the earth, while men and women scatter seeds into furrows. Irrigation canals, carefully dug and maintained, carry water from the rivers into the fields, ensuring that crops survive the dry seasons. To walk among these fields is to hear the splash of water, the rustle of grain, the calls of farmers working together beneath the wide sky. Back in the city, artisans prepare their workshops. Potters shape clay upon spinning wheels, their hands steady, their focus absolute. The clay dries in the sun, then hardens in kilns, becoming vessels for grain, oil, or beer. Metalworkers heat bronze in small furnaces, hammering it into tools, weapons, and ornaments. Weavers sit at looms, their fingers moving swiftly, transforming threads of wool into cloth for clothing or trade. Each workshop hums with concentration, each craft practiced with skill passed down through generations. The sound of these trades fills the city, a quiet music of labor that sustains all life within the walls. The markets are the beating heart of daily activity. Imagine narrow lanes filled with stalls where merchants call out their wares. Baskets overflow with dates, figs, onions, and bread. Fish glisten upon mats, their scent mingling with the aroma of spices and herbs. Clay jars filled with oil and beer are stacked neatly, ready for purchase. Traders from distant lands bring copper, tin, and lapis lazuli, exchanged for grain, wool, and crafted goods. Coins do not yet exist. Transactions are recorded on clay tablets with scribes sitting nearby to press the details into permanence. The marketplace is not only commerce but community, a place where news is shared, friendships formed, disputes settled, and laughter exchanged. Religion threads through every aspect of daily life. Each household keeps small statues or offerings for the gods, placed upon simple altars in courtyards. Temples rise above the city, where priests perform rituals on behalf of the people. Festivals punctuate the year, marking harvests, new moons, and sacred myths. Imagine a procession through the streets, music filling the air as statues of the gods are carried upon platforms, followed by chanting crowds. Children watch with wide eyes, their hands clasped, their hearts filled with awe. For the Mesopotamians, the gods are not distant. They are present in every field, every hearth, every canal, and every star in the sky. Evenings in Mesopotamia are gentle, marked by the return of families from work and trade. Meals are shared in courtyards: bread, beer, fish, dates, onions, and cheese. Stories are told, myths of creation, tales of Gilgamesh, proverbs that pass wisdom from one generation to another. Music often accompanies these gatherings: flutes carved from reeds, drums stretched with animal hide, harps strummed softly under the stars. Children fall asleep in their parents' arms as the fire burns low, while neighbors bid each other good night. Above, the constellations shine, their patterns carefully observed by priests who record omens upon clay tablets, seeking to read the will of the gods. Life is not without hardship. Floods sometimes destroy fields, droughts threaten harvests, and disease spreads quickly in crowded cities. Justice, though codified in laws, is not always fair. The poor often struggle, while the wealthy enjoy greater comforts. Slaves captured in war or born into servitude labor for their masters with little hope of freedom. And yet, even within these struggles, life continues with resilience. The clay tablets reveal complaints, contracts, disputes, but also songs, prayers, and moments of joy. Mesopotamian life was not golden perfection, but human endurance, shaped by the rivers, sustained by community, enriched by story. As you listen, let yourself imagine lying in a courtyard as night falls over Mesopotamia. The stars begin to brighten above, the fires burn low, the city quiets. You hear the distant call of a shepherd returning with his flock, the laughter of children fading into dreams, the whisper of wind rustling through reeds by the river. The ziggurat looms in the distance, glowing faintly in torchlight, a reminder of the gods watching over the city. The air is warm but soft, carrying the scent of bread baked earlier in the day, the fragrance of oil lamps burning gently. You close your eyes, and in that moment you are no longer an observer of history but part of its rhythm, resting within the same patterns of life that carried Mesopotamia forward for millennia. And softly as you drift, let me remind you once more. If these stories of ordinary lives bring you calm, if you find comfort in resting within the rhythm of the past, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button to let this gentle space grow, reaching others who long for nights of peace. And if you are still listening, still awake beneath these ancient stars, leave a comment below. Write "still listening," or share how far into Mesopotamia's daily life your dreams began to gather you. These signs of presence bind us together across time, just as families and neighbors bound one another in the cities of old. This is daily life in Mesopotamia. Not the roar of kings, but the whisper of families. Not the march of armies, but the hum of workshops. Not the splendor of empires, but the resilience of people who lived, worked, prayed, and dreamed. Rest now within their rhythm, knowing that history is not only monuments and conquests, but also bread and firelight, laughter and silence, the steady heartbeat of ordinary days. Block 13, Science and the Heavens, the astronomers of Babylon. As the daily rhythm of life carried the people of Mesopotamia through harvests, markets, and festivals, another rhythm called out to them from above, the rhythm of the heavens. Long before telescopes or modern science, the priests and scholars of Babylon turned their gaze to the night sky, seeking to understand its mysteries, to read in the stars the language of the divine, and to bring order to the cycles of time. Their work was both sacred and practical, for to them the heavens were not silent. They were a great tablet inscribed by the gods, filled with omens, patterns, and truths waiting to be read. Imagine lying on the rooftop of a Babylonian house. The air is warm, the lamps flicker softly in courtyards below, and above you the sky spreads vast and unbroken. With no smoke or city lights to dim it, the stars blaze in numbers that overwhelm the eye. The Milky Way stretches like a river of light. Constellations shimmer in familiar shapes. The moon rises with quiet majesty, and wandering planets glow with hues of red, gold, and white. To the Babylonians, this was not mere beauty. It was communication. The heavens were alive with meaning, and to study them was to listen to the voice of the cosmos. The astronomers of Babylon were meticulous observers. Night after night, for centuries, they recorded the rising and setting of stars, the phases of the moon, the paths of the planets. On clay tablets, they pressed lines of cuneiform, noting eclipses, conjunctions, and intervals. From these patient records grew patterns, and from patterns came prediction. The Babylonians could foresee eclipses, mark the cycles of Venus, and track the movements of Jupiter and Saturn with astonishing accuracy. Imagine a priest standing atop a ziggurat, stylus in hand, eyes fixed upon the moon, noting the exact moment of its rise, then pressing the data into clay. He is not simply gazing in wonder. He is building knowledge brick by brick, mark by mark across generations. For them, astronomy was inseparable from astrology. The stars were God's messengers, and their alignments foretold the fate of kings and nations. An eclipse might mean danger. A bright star near the moon might signal victory or calamity. Every movement was a sign, every cycle a message. Kings consulted these scholars before battles, before journeys, before great decisions. In this way, the heavens became part of governance itself, binding politics, religion, and science together in a single web. But beyond omens, the Babylonians also achieved something profoundly human: the creation of calendars. By tracking the cycles of the moon and the sun, they divided time into months and years, establishing systems that guided planting, harvests, and festivals. Imagine the relief of farmers who knew when to sow and when to reap, guided by the precision of the stars. Imagine priests aligning rituals to the cycles of the moon, ensuring harmony between earth and heaven. The measurement of time, which we now take for granted, was one of Mesopotamia's greatest gifts, born from nights of patient stargazing. The Babylonians also introduced the sexagesimal system, a base 60 mathematics that still shapes our lives today. From them, we inherited the division of the hour into 60 minutes, and the circle into 360 degrees. Imagine scribes drawing circles on clay, dividing them carefully. inscribing numbers that would echo into the modern world. Each mark was more than arithmetic. It was a step toward understanding the infinite, a bridge between earth and sky. Picture the Library of Nineveh, where many of these astronomical tablets were preserved, later rediscovered millennia after they were written. There, shelves once held records of lunar eclipses, star catalogs, and planetary cycles. Though the Assyrian Empire fell, the knowledge remained, carried forward by the clay tablets that survived fire and ruin. Today, when we look upon those ancient marks, we see not only superstition but the beginnings of science, the patient desire to understand the universe by observation, record, and calculation. And yet, for the Babylonians themselves, the science of the stars was never dry or detached. It was infused with awe, with reverence, with the sense that to look at the heavens was to approach the divine. Their observations were not only mathematics, but meditation, a nightly dialogue with the cosmos. In this way, their work mirrors our own quiet nights of reflection. Just as they lay upon rooftops and trace the constellations, so too can we lie beneath the stars and feel the same wonder, the same humility, the same peace. As you breathe slowly now, let your imagination rise to those ancient rooftops. Hear the soft murmur of the city fading into silence. Feel the cool night air brushing your skin. See the priests and scribes lifting their gaze, marking the positions of stars, their hands steady, their hearts filled with awe. Above them, the heavens turn, vast and eternal, their rhythm steady as breath itself. You too are part of this rhythm. Your breathing, your heartbeat, your dreams, all flow with the same cycles that the Babylonians observed thousands of years ago. And softly, before you drift further, let me remind you, if these stories carry you into calm, if the heavens of Babylon bring you peace, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button if you are still with me. A small gesture that helps this quiet space shine a little brighter. And perhaps leave a comment, write, "Still listening," or share the moment when the stars carried you into dreams. Just as the Babylonians left marks upon clay to preserve their presence, your words here leave marks that keep this journey alive. The astronomers of Babylon remind us that science and wonder are not separate. To measure the heavens is also to marvel at them. To predict an eclipse is also to feel awe when the shadow falls. To divide time into hours and degrees is also to recognize the beauty of order in the chaos of the sky. Their work was practical, but it was also poetry, a way of living in harmony with the vastness above. As you drift deeper into rest, let the stars of Babylon guide you. Imagine the constellations glowing softly, the planets moving with patient certainty, the moon rising silver over the city walls. Hear the scratch of styluses on clay, the whispers of priests recording the heavens, the silence of the cosmos embracing them all. Inhale the wonder of the sky. Exhale the peace of knowing that you too are part of its eternal rhythm. Rest now beneath the same heavens that once spoke to Babylon, letting their quiet order carry you gently into sleep. This is science and the heavens, the astronomers of Babylon, the guardians of time and memory. Sleep now within their story, knowing that even as empires fall, the stars remain, eternal companions in the night. Block 14, Laws, Contracts, and Families. The stars guided the farmers and the priests, and the rivers nourished the fields and cities. Yet beneath those grand rhythms of heaven and earth lay another rhythm. The rhythm of human relationships, of families, of promises, and of obligations. In Mesopotamia, where so much of life was fragile and uncertain, where floods could ruin fields and wars could topple rulers, the structure of society rested on laws and contracts. These laws were not just carved on stones or pressed into clay for kings to boast of. They were lived daily, in marriages, in trade, in inheritance, in the quiet decisions of families sitting around their hearths. Imagine stepping into a Babylonian courtyard where a family has gathered at dusk. The smell of bread and dates fills the air. Children run in circles, laughter echoing against the clay walls. But nearby, a scribe sits with his stylus and a tablet, recording a marriage contract. Two families are uniting their children, promising dowries of land, livestock, or silver, binding them not only with love, but with obligation. The scribe's hand is steady, the wedges pressed carefully into clay. When the tablet is dried and sealed with a cylinder seal, a small carved stone rolled across the clay to leave an impression. The promise is no longer just words. It is permanent, enduring, recognized by the gods, the community, and the law. Such contracts touched every corner of life. If a man borrowed grain from a neighbor, a tablet recorded the debt. If land was sold, the boundaries were described in careful detail. If a slave was freed, the declaration was written down. The clay tablet was the silent witness to agreements, ensuring that memory did not falter, that disputes could be resolved with clarity. In this way, Mesopotamia was not only the birthplace of writing but also of bureaucracy, of the idea that life itself could be organized and safeguarded by records. But the laws of Mesopotamia were more than transactions. They also sought to regulate justice, to balance power between rich and poor, strong and weak. Codes such as that of Hammurabi, but also earlier ones like Ur-Nammu's, laid out rules for family life, the rights of wives, the inheritance of children, the duties of sons to their fathers. Some laws might seem harsh to us now, punishments of physical harm, social inequality written into the code, yet they also reveal a striving for order, for predictability, for the assurance that life was not ruled by whim, but by rules understood by all. Picture a dispute over land. Two neighbors argue by the edge of a field, each claiming a boundary belongs to him. Voices rise, tempers flare, but instead of violence, they go to the city gate, where elders sit in judgment. A scribe unrolls a tablet, reading aloud the terms of a contract. Witnesses nod, seals are examined, and the matter is resolved not by strength of arm, but by the authority of law. In this way, communities preserved peace, and individuals found security. Family life itself was deeply intertwined with these laws. Marriage was not only a union of affection, but a binding agreement of property and inheritance. Wives managed households, raised children, and often worked alongside men in fields or workshops. Children were precious, not only for love, but for the continuation of family lines, for the labor they could provide, for the care they would one day give their parents. Adoption was common, especially for childless couples, and it too was sealed by contract. Even death did not escape record. Wills and inheritance documents ensured that property was passed on, that families remained tied together across generations. And yet, beyond the contracts and tablets, life in families was tender, human, and filled with the same joys and struggles we know today. Imagine a mother soothing her child with a lullaby, her voice low and steady, the same stars shining above her that we see tonight. Imagine a father teaching his son to guide a plow, or his daughter to spin wool, their hands steady, their words patient. Imagine siblings playing together in courtyards, their laughter drifting upward into the night sky. These moments were not recorded on tablets, but they were the true substance of life, the unbroken chain of human intimacy that sustained Mesopotamian society. In the temples, priests reminded families that their lives were woven into a larger order. The gods watched over contracts, judged disputes, blessed marriages, and cursed those who broke promises. To honor one's word was not only civic duty, but spiritual obligation. To betray a contract was to risk divine anger, not only human judgment. Thus, law, religion, and family were braided together, inseparable, sustaining both individuals and the whole community. As you breathe slowly now, let yourself imagine lying in a courtyard under Mesopotamian skies. A lamp burns gently beside you, its flame swaying in the night breeze. Nearby, a scribe rolls a cylinder seal across fresh clay, leaving behind patterns of lions, birds, or sacred symbols. The marks are small, yet they hold within them the lives of families, the trust of neighbors, the promises of tomorrow. Around you, voices soften as families settle into rest, children drifting into dreams, the city sinking into calm, the clay tablets dry in storerooms, the contracts preserved, the laws waiting to be read again. And softly, let me remind you, if this journey into the quiet laws of daily life brings you rest, if these stories of families and promises soothe your night, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button to let this calm space grow, so that more travelers can find peace here. And if you are still awake, leave a comment. Perhaps tell us how far into the story your eyes began to close, or simply write, "Still listening." Like the marks on clay, your words endure, carrying presence across the silence of night. The laws, contracts, and families of Mesopotamia remind us that civilization is not only palaces and battles, but trust and memory, promises and care. To live in Mesopotamia was to live within a web of words pressed into clay, words that ensured survival, fairness, and continuity. As you drift now into sleep, let yourself rest within that web, knowing that just as contracts bound families to one another, so too are we bound together by story, by memory, by the eternal rhythm of human connection. This is the law, the contract, the family, the quiet structure of Mesopotamia, the unseen foundation upon which all else was built. Sleep now within it, safe and steady, carried gently by the rivers of time. Block 15, Art and Objects, the beauty of Mesopotamia. When we think of empires, our minds often turn to armies and kings, to laws and palaces, to conquests and decline. Yet civilizations are also remembered by what they leave behind in beauty, in the objects shaped by human hands, in the art that carries memory into form, in the small details that whisper of how people saw their world. Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, was not only the cradle of writing and law, it was also a cradle of art, of craftsmanship, of objects that spoke as eloquently as words pressed into clay. To step into this world is to step into workshops filled with quiet labor, into temples adorned with sacred objects, into homes decorated with humble beauty. Imagine for a moment entering a temple in Ur during its height. The ziggurat rises above you, its terraces gleaming, but within the temple chambers the air is cool, lit by oil lamps flickering against walls. Altars are adorned with offerings, small statuettes of worshippers carved in stone or molded in clay, their hands clasped, their eyes wide, gazing upward as if forever fixed on the divine. These votive figures are silent prayers made solid, eternal supplications left in the presence of the gods. Each one is unique, some small, some tall, some with inscriptions naming the devotee. Together they form a chorus of devotion frozen in time. Art was not separate from life in Mesopotamia. It was woven into its every corner. Cylinder seals, those small carved stones used to imprint images upon clay, are among the most exquisite examples. Picture a scribe rolling a seal across a tablet to mark ownership or authenticate a contract. As the cylinder turns, It leaves behind a scene of astonishing intricacy. Gods seated on thrones, animals walking in procession, priests pouring libations, heroes grappling with lions. The detail is so fine, so delicate, that each seal becomes not just a practical tool but a tiny work of art. To hold one in your hand is to hold a world of images, compressed into stone, meant to endure long after voices fade. Beyond temples and tablets, Mesopotamian art flourished in objects of daily life. Pottery was painted with geometric patterns, sometimes with scenes of animals or plants. Jewelry of gold and silver gleamed with inset stones of lapis lazuli, carnelian and turquoise, carried from distant lands through networks of trade. Imagine a necklace resting upon the neck of a queen, each bead polished to shine in the torchlight, each stone whispering of faraway mountains and deserts. Imagine earrings, bracelets, rings, their beauty not only an adornment, but a declaration of status, wealth, and care. Sculpture, too, told stories in stone. Reliefs carved upon palace walls depicted kings in triumph, gods bestowing power, or lions hunted in ritual combat. The detail is sharp, the lines deliberate, the figures both realistic and symbolic. To walk through the palace of Ashurbanipal or Nebuchadnezzar was to walk through a gallery of images meant to inspire awe, to declare authority, to bind the present to the eternal. Yet even in these grand works, there is a quiet rhythm, a patience in the hands that carved them, an unspoken dialogue between artist and stone. Music, though less preserved, was also an art of Mesopotamia. Lyres and harps have been uncovered in tombs, their frames inlaid with gold and lapis, their strings long vanished but their beauty intact. Imagine sitting in a dimly lit hall, hearing the soft strumming of a lyre, the rise of a flute, the steady beat of a drum. The melodies are slow, repetitive, hypnotic, meant not to stir frenzy but to guide worship, to calm the heart, to accompany stories and prayers. Music was art that filled the air, fleeting yet eternal in its impression. Even the simplest objects bore the imprint of artistry. A clay jar might be shaped with elegance, its curve pleasing to the hand and eye. A spindle whorl used for spinning wool might be etched with patterns. A child's toy molded from clay might carry the image of an animal, playful and charming. In these objects we see not only necessity but creativity, the human impulse to shape beauty, even in the tools of survival. As you imagine these objects, let yourself wander into a Mesopotamian workshop. The air smells of clay and fire, of stone dust and oil. Artisans sit at benches, their hands steady, their concentration deep. One carves a cylinder seal, the stylus tapping gently against stone. Another polishes a bead of lapis lazuli until it gleams. Another shapes a pot upon a wheel, the clay spinning beneath his fingers, soft and yielding, ready to take form. The workshop hums with quiet labor, each artisan contributing to the fabric of beauty that will adorn homes, temples, and palaces. And yet beyond the splendor of queens and kings, beyond the treasures preserved in tombs and ruins, art also lived in the intimate spaces of family. Imagine a small home where a mother sets a simple clay figurine upon a shelf, believing it will protect her children. Imagine a father carving a toy for his son, a bird or a bull to make him smile. Imagine neighbors exchanging gifts of crafted bowls or jewelry, gestures of friendship that carried meaning far beyond their material value. In these moments, art was not only about status or worship, it was about connection, memory, and care. As you breathe slowly now, let these images settle in your mind. Picture the votive statues gazing upward, their eyes wide and eternal. Picture the seals rolling across clay, leaving behind worlds in miniature. Picture the gleam of gold and lapis, The softness of music, the hum of workshops, the laughter of children playing with clay animals beneath the stars. The art of Mesopotamia was not distant or abstract. It was intimate, immediate, part of daily life, part of the rhythm of existence itself. And gently, before you drift further, let me remind you, if the beauty of these objects brings calm to your night, if resting in the artistry of the past helps you find peace, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button as a quiet gesture, helping this sanctuary of stories grow. And if you are still listening, still awake among these statues and seals, leave a comment, write "still listening," or share which image carried you most toward sleep. Like the artists who left marks upon stone and clay, your words leave marks here, shaping this journey across time. The beauty of Mesopotamia lies not only in its ziggurats or its armies, but in its art, in its objects, in the careful hands that shaped beauty from earth, stone, and metal. These works whisper across millennia, reminding us that even in the earliest civilizations, the human heart longed for beauty, for memory, for something enduring. Rest now in that beauty. Let it cradle you like music. Let it surround you like torchlight. Let it carry you gently into dreams. This is the art and the objects of Mesopotamia, silent witnesses, eternal companions, the beauty left behind by hands that once shaped, once loved, once dreamed. Sleep within their story tonight, and let their calm endure within you. Block 16, Knowledge in Mathematics, the Invention of Numbers. Civilization is not only measured by its cities or its kings, nor by the walls it raises or the laws it carves into stone. It is also measured in something quieter, less visible, yet far more enduring: the knowledge it leaves behind. Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, was not only the cradle of writing and art, but also the birthplace of numbers, of mathematics, of the ability to measure and calculate, to order the world with precision. To walk among the clay tablets of this land is to see not only stories and prayers, but also lists of numbers, tables of multiplication, divisions of time and space. Here, humanity learned to count the world, and in counting, to understand it. Imagine a scribe seated cross-legged in a courtyard, the sun casting soft light across the clay tablet in his lap. In one hand, he holds a reed stylus. In the other, he steadies the damp clay. Around him, children watch as he presses not only words, but numbers into the surface. Wedge after wedge, line after line, the symbols take shape, marks for quantities of grain, for measures of silver, for the boundaries of a field. To the untrained eye it may seem simple, but to these scribes, each mark carries order. Each calculation ensures fairness. Each number binds society together. The Mesopotamians used a system unlike our own, one based on 60, the sexagesimal system. From this ancient choice, born perhaps of practicality, perhaps of the ease of dividing 60 into many equal parts, flows our own division of the hour into 60 minutes, and the circle into 360 degrees. Imagine the quiet brilliance of such a system, devised thousands of years ago, still shaping our clocks, our maps, our geometry today. The sexagesimal system allowed fractions to be expressed with ease, calculations to be performed with clarity, and knowledge to be preserved in a way that carried forward through millennia. Picture a school for scribes, a place where young students are trained in both words and numbers. The room is simple, its floor covered in dust, its walls plain clay, yet it hums with the sound of styluses tapping against tablets. A teacher dictates, 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 3 is 12. The students repeat, their hands pressing rows of numbers, their voices chanting like a rhythm, turning mathematics into song. Slowly, they learn multiplication tables, reciprocal tables, systems of division. Slowly, they grasp that numbers are not only tools for trade, but also keys to the mysteries of the world. The tablets they leave behind reveal a sophistication that astonishes even today. Problems in geometry and algebra, calculations for areas of fields, volumes of containers, even approximations of square roots. One tablet contains a diagram of a right-angled triangle with numbers that anticipate what we now call the Pythagorean theorem, written more than 1,000 years before Pythagoras lived. Another shows detailed calculations of planetary cycles, revealing not only mathematical skill, but astronomical precision. The Mesopotamians did not separate science from mathematics, nor mathematics from life. To them, numbers were woven into every fabric: farming, trade, architecture, ritual, and the heavens themselves. Consider the marketplace. A merchant sells grain to a farmer, and the quantity must be measured. Standardized weights are brought out, bronze or stone, their forms familiar to all. The grain is poured into baskets, the weights balanced, the numbers recorded. Fairness depends on accuracy, and accuracy depends on mathematics. Without numbers, trade would falter, trust would collapse, society would weaken. With numbers, exchange flows smoothly, contracts are honored, disputes resolved. Numbers are not abstract here, they are bread, they are survival, they are life itself. Consider also the builders who raise walls and temples. They must measure bricks, align foundations, calculate the slope of ramps, divide space into harmony. With ropes, rods, and tablets, they bring order to clay and stone. Without mathematics, no ziggurat could rise, no canal could flow, no palace could endure. Numbers are hidden in every brick, every measure of distance, every span of rope stretched taut across the ground. And beyond the earth, the heavens are counted too. Priests measure the cycles of the moon, the intervals of eclipses, the wandering of planets. They chart these movements with numbers, transforming the unpredictable into patterns, the mysterious into rhythm. In doing so, they bring the cosmos closer, turning infinite sky into something that can be grasped, recorded, and shared. As you breathe slowly now, imagine lying in a Mesopotamian school as night falls. The students have gone home. The tablets rest in rows, drying in the air. The marks upon them are small, silent, yet filled with power. They carry within them multiplication tables, measures of fields, divisions of time, calculations of stars. Around you, the city quiets. The sounds of merchants fade. The fires dim. The river flows steady. The numbers remain, silent yet eternal, like the stars themselves. And softly, before you drift deeper, let me remind you, if resting in the story of knowledge brings you peace, if the invention of numbers carries you into calm, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button if you are still with me, letting this gentle space grow brighter. And if your eyes are closing but you are still listening, leave a comment. Write "still listening," or share how far into the numbers your dreams began. Just as the scribes pressed marks into clay, your words pressed here keep this journey alive, binding us across nights and centuries. Numbers are quiet, yet they are enduring. They carry fairness into trade, harmony into building, order into time, meaning into the heavens. The Mesopotamians, in their patient work, gave us the gift of mathematics, a gift that continues to shape every day of our lives. As you drift now into sleep, let the rhythm of numbers become your rhythm. Inhale 1, exhale 2, inhale 3, exhale 4. Each breath a measure, each measure a step, each step a journey into rest. This is knowledge, this is mathematics, this is the invention of numbers. the silent gift of Mesopotamia, the language that binds earth and sky, body and breath, past and present. Sleep within its order tonight, and let its calm carry you gently into dreams. Block 17, Medicine, Healing, and the Body. Civilization is not only the story of kings and battles, of temples and numbers, but also the story of bodies, fragile, enduring, wounded, and healed. In Mesopotamia, where life was often precarious, where floods and famine threatened survival, where disease could sweep through crowded cities, medicine became both necessity and art. Healing was never merely physical. It was spiritual, ritual, practical, and deeply human. To read the clay tablets of this land is to hear voices of doctors, priests, and families, all seeking the same thing we still seek today: relief from pain, restoration of strength, and the quiet comfort of health. Imagine entering a small room within a Babylonian house. The air is warm, the floor cool beneath your feet. In the corner sits a healer, surrounded by jars of herbs, bowls of water, and tablets inscribed with incantations. A child lies nearby, restless with fever, while a mother watches with worried eyes. The healer murmurs words of comfort, sprinkling water mixed with crushed plants over the child's skin. His voice is low, his movements steady. For the Mesopotamians, healing was always twofold: physical remedies guided by experience, and ritual invocations calling upon the gods to drive away sickness. The earliest records show that Mesopotamian healers divided illness into categories. Some were believed to come from natural causes: wounds from accidents, fevers from heat, pains from the body itself. Others were thought to be caused by demons or the displeasure of the gods. To treat the first, healers applied poultices, oils and balms made from herbs, minerals, and animal products. To treat the second, priests performed rituals, recited incantations, and placed protective amulets upon the body. Medicine was never divorced from the sacred. To heal the body was also to heal the spirit, to realign the sufferer with the will of the gods. Picture the shelves of a healer's room lined with clay jars filled with dried plants. There is willow bark for pain, licorice root for coughs, juniper for cleansing. Oils are mixed with wine, honey, or milk to create soothing balms. Bandages are woven from linen, soaked in oils to prevent infection. Each preparation is written on tablets in careful detail, the earliest medical texts of the world. Some read like recipes. Take the root of the plant, grind it fine, mix with water, apply to the wound. Others combine science and magic. Speak this incantation as you rub the oil. Call upon the gods so that the demon departs. Midwives played a central role in daily healing, especially in childbirth, which was both sacred and dangerous. Imagine a small room filled with the cries of a woman in labor, attended by midwives who chant protective words, offer supportive hands, and use herbs to ease the pain. The moment of birth is fragile. Both life and death hover nearby. Amulets are placed at the bed's corners, invoking protective deities. When the child finally emerges and takes its first breath, relief and joy flood the household. For the Mesopotamians, this was not only a medical event, but a spiritual one, a passage watched over by gods and ancestors alike. Healing also extended to diagnosis. Mesopotamian texts reveal careful observation, noting symptoms, comparing them to patterns recorded in tablets, predicting outcomes based on past cases. A healer might examine the color of the skin, the clarity of the eyes, the sound of the breath, the strength of the pulse. These details were not random but organized into systems of understanding, linking cause and effect, treatment and outcome. Though still framed by religion and myth, this was the first stirrings of scientific medicine, the attempt to understand the body as a system of signs. The gods most associated with healing were Gula, often represented with dogs as her sacred companions, and Ninurta, a god of war and healing. Temples dedicated to Gula were places where the sick sought refuge, where offerings were made, and where priests performed rituals of purification. Imagine lying upon a mat within such a temple, the air heavy with incense, the chants of priests surrounding you like waves. You close your eyes, and whether by medicine, prayer, or the strength of belief, you feel the weight of sickness lift, replaced by calm. Medicine in Mesopotamia was also practical in its preservation of cleanliness. The people valued bathing, often in rivers or with water poured from jars. They used oils to soften the skin, perfumes to mask odors, and balms to heal wounds. These practices, though simple, helped prevent the spread of illness, sustaining health in ways they did not fully understand but practiced faithfully. And yet healing was never guaranteed. Illness often returned, wounds festered, lives were lost. But within the struggle lay resilience. The tablets reveal not despair but determination, the constant effort to find remedies, to learn from experience, to seek balance between body, spirit, and world. This striving for health is as old as humanity itself, and in Mesopotamia we see its earliest written form. As you breathe deeply now, imagine yourself lying in a quiet chamber of a healer's house. A lamp glows softly, herbs hang from the walls, the air carries the fragrance of juniper and cedar. Outside, the city settles into silence. The river flows. The stars shine. You feel the healer's hands applying a balm, his voice chanting words of comfort. Slowly, your body relaxes, your mind eases, your breath steadies. Whether by medicine, ritual, or the simple kindness of presence, you feel healed, restored, safe. And softly, let me remind you, if these stories of ancient healing bring you rest, if the voices of Mesopotamian medicine soothe your night, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button as a gentle sign of your presence, letting this sanctuary of calm grow. And if you are still listening, leave a comment. Perhaps tell us if the healer's chant carried you into dreams, or simply write, "Still listening." Just as tablets preserved the knowledge of remedies, your words preserve the life of this journey across nights. The medicine of Mesopotamia was imperfect, but it was the beginning. It reminds us that healing is not only science but care, not only remedies but presence, not only the body but the soul. Rest now within that reminder. Let it cradle you like a balm. Let it surround you like incense. Let it carry you into dreams as soft as whispered chants. This is medicine, healing, and the body, the fragile, enduring, eternal effort of humanity to ease suffering, to find balance, to restore peace. Sleep now within its story, and let it heal you with rest. Block 18, War, Conquest, and the Eternal Cycle. For all the beauty of Mesopotamia, for all its art, temples, mathematics, and medicine, there was always another rhythm pulsing beneath the surface, the rhythm of war. Civilization in the land between the rivers was never a quiet stream flowing endlessly in peace. It was a cycle of rising and falling, of cities built and destroyed, of empires expanding and then crumbling. Again and again, armies marched across the plains. Walls rose only to fall. Rulers claimed dominion only to vanish into dust. War was not an interruption of Mesopotamian life. It was part of its eternal pattern, woven into its soil, recorded in its tablets, remembered in its myths. Imagine standing upon the walls of a city as dawn breaks. The sky is pale with the first light, the air tense with silence. In the distance, dust rises where an army approaches. The sound is faint at first, the thud of marching feet, the creak of chariots, the bray of animals carrying supplies. Then, as they draw nearer, the noise swells. Shouts of commanders, the clang of bronze weapons, the rumble of wheels. From your vantage, you see shields glint in the sunlight, spears lifted like a forest of metal, banners fluttering with symbols of conquest. This scene repeated itself countless times across Mesopotamia's long history, each army believing it would succeed where others had failed, each king convinced his rule would endure. The earliest wars were fought between city-states, Ur against Lagash, Kish against Uruk, neighbors clashing over land, water, or pride. Tablets record treaties carved into clay, boasting of victories, lamenting defeats. Reliefs depict kings trampling enemies beneath their chariots, offering captives to the gods. These conflicts were brutal, but they were also deeply ritualized. Victories were celebrated with offerings, defeats mourned with prayers. War was not only political, it was sacred, a struggle watched and judged by the divine. As centuries passed, war grew larger in scale. Empires like Akkad, Assyria, Babylon, and Persia extended their reach, commanding armies that spanned nations. Their conquests reshaped the map of the Near East. Their battles determined the fate of millions. The Assyrians especially became feared for their discipline and cruelty, leaving behind reliefs that show sieges, captives, and executions in vivid detail. Yet alongside terror, they also brought order, roads, and knowledge. Conquest was always double-edged. Destruction and creation, loss and renewal, grief and opportunity. Picture the siege of a city. Towers of wood rolled forward. Battering rams slammed against gates. Archers rained arrows from above. Within the walls, defenders hurled stones, poured boiling liquids, cried out in desperation. The air filled with smoke, fire, and the cries of the wounded. For days, weeks, sometimes months, the battle raged until finally the walls fell and the city was consumed. Such destruction was devastating, but from it new rulers emerged, new temples were raised, new tablets written. War was always followed by rebuilding, as if the soil of Mesopotamia demanded both blood and seed, both ruin and renewal. Yet war was not only about kings and armies. It touched every life. Farmers were conscripted to fight, leaving fields untended. Families fled before advancing forces, carrying what little they could. Merchants saw their trade disrupted, their goods stolen or burned. Children grew up with memories of fire and fear. And yet after the armies moved on, those same families returned to rebuild their homes, replant their fields, reopen their markets. Life resumed, fragile yet resilient, as though even the memory of war could not stop the eternal rhythm of survival. The myths of Mesopotamia reflect this cycle. In the story of the god Marduk defeating the chaos dragon Tiamat, we see war as creation, struggle giving birth to order. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, battles with monsters symbolize the fight against mortality and fear. Even the gods were warriors, their conflicts shaping the fates of humans below. To the Mesopotamians, war was not a random eruption, but part of the cosmic order, an eternal struggle between chaos and stability, destruction and creation. As you breathe slowly now, imagine yourself upon the battlefield, not as a fighter, but as an observer carried gently above. From this vantage, the clamor softens. The noise of weapons becomes distant. The cries of warriors fade. The dust settles like mist. You see the cycle clearly. Armies gather, clash, and disperse. Cities rise, fall, and rise again. War is not endless chaos, but an ebb and flow, a tide as steady as the rivers, as constant as the stars. And within that tide, Humanity endures, always rebuilding, always continuing. And softly, let me remind you, if this reflection on the eternal cycles of war and peace carries you into rest, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button to let this calm space grow stronger. And if you are still listening, leave a comment. Perhaps share how far into the march of history your eyes began to close, or simply write, "Still listening." Just as tablets recorded battles long forgotten, your words here record presence, connection, and rest. The wars of Mesopotamia remind us that destruction and creation are intertwined. No empire endured forever, yet from each collapse came renewal. No city stood unchallenged, yet each time it fell, its people rebuilt. War was pain, but it was also transition, a turning of the wheel that carried humanity forward. As you drift into sleep, let that rhythm soothe you. The rise and fall, the clash and the calm, the endless cycle of history. This is war, conquest, and the eternal cycle. Not told to stir fear, but to remind you that even in struggle there is continuity. Even in ruin there is renewal. Even in endings there are beginnings. Rest now in that truth. Let it carry you gently into dreams as the rivers and the stars continue their eternal flow. Block 19. Legacy of Mesopotamia. The rivers still flow, the soil still holds its quiet richness. The ruins of ziggurats still rise faintly from the earth. The empires that once claimed Mesopotamia have vanished, their armies dispersed, their kings forgotten. Yet the legacy of this land has never disappeared. It lives on in the ways we measure time, the way we write, the way we count, the way we order our lives with law and story. Though the voices of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria are long gone, their echoes shape our world still, whispering in the patterns of our calendars, in the rhythm of our hours, in the words and numbers that flow from our own hands. Imagine holding a small clay tablet pressed by a scribe thousands of years ago. Its surface is rough, its corners chipped, but the wedge-shaped marks remain. You trace them with your finger, and though you cannot read them without study, you sense their permanence. On this tablet may be a list of debts, a hymn to a god, a record of the stars, or a story of kings. Whatever it holds, it is a bridge across time, connecting the hand of a long-forgotten scribe to yours. This is the legacy of Mesopotamia, not only the great walls and palaces, but the marks left upon clay, enduring through millennia, carrying memory forward. The invention of writing in Sumer was one of humanity's most profound achievements. From it flowed literature, law, history, science, religion, all the treasures of civilization. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's first great work of literature, still speaks to us today of friendship, loss, and the search for meaning. The codes of law, from Ur-Nammu to Hammurabi, remind us of our endless quest for justice and fairness. The records of trade and contracts reveal the roots of economy and trust. To this day, every book, every letter, every word we write carries within it the echo of those first marks pressed into clay by reed styluses. Mathematics, too, remains a gift of Mesopotamia. The division of time into 60 minutes, the circle into 360 degrees, the careful observation of astronomical cycles. These are not abstract relics, but living tools we use each day. Every glance at a clock, every calculation of distance, every navigation of the stars owes something to the patient work of Mesopotamian scholars. Their sexagesimal system still beats within the heart of modern science, invisible yet indispensable, a legacy of numbers woven into the fabric of our lives. The study of the heavens, begun upon rooftops and ziggurats, continues in telescopes and observatories. When modern astronomers chart the movements of planets or predict eclipses, They are heirs to Babylonian priests who once pressed lunar cycles into clay. The stars that guided them still shine above us, the same constellations, the same patterns of light. Their legacy is not only scientific but spiritual, reminding us that to gaze at the heavens is to seek meaning, to place ourselves within the vastness of creation. The structures of society, contracts, laws, families, also descend from this land. The idea that agreements should be recorded, that laws should be public, that justice should be codified, remains the foundation of our modern world. Every court that judges by written law, every agreement signed and sealed, every inheritance passed from parent to child, carries forward the quiet wisdom of Mesopotamia. Even in art, their influence lingers. Cylinder seals, votive statues, reliefs carved upon stone. These reveal not only their beauty but their way of seeing. The wide eyes of worshippers gazing upward remind us of humanity's eternal longing for the divine. The heroic hunts carved upon palace walls echo in later depictions of kingship across cultures. Their jewelry, pottery, and instruments speak of the human impulse to shape beauty from earth and fire, to adorn life with meaning. Yet perhaps the greatest legacy of Mesopotamia is the reminder of impermanence. Each empire believed it would endure forever. Each king carved his triumphs into stone. Each city raised its walls high. And yet, in time, all fell. The floods of history swept over them, and their voices faded. What remains is not the roar of armies, but the quiet marks of scribes, not the pride of kings, but the daily lives of families, not the victories of war, but the resilience of people who lived, worked, prayed, and dreamed. Their legacy is both grandeur and humility, a reminder that civilization is fragile yet enduring, fleeting yet eternal in its influence. As you breathe slowly now, imagine standing among the ruins of Ur or Babylon. The walls are broken, the streets silent, the ziggurat a shadow of its former self. Yet the earth still holds memory. Beneath your feet lie countless shards of pottery, fragments of tablets, whispers of voices long gone. The wind carries dust across the plain, but also the echoes of prayers, chants, laughter, and music. You look upward, and the same stars shine that once guided priests and farmers, kings and soldiers. The past has faded, but its essence remains, living within the very fabric of who we are. And softly, let me remind you, if this reflection on legacy carries you into calm, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button as a gentle sign of your presence, and if you are still listening, leave a comment. Perhaps write, "Still listening," or share which part of Mesopotamia's story carried you deepest into dreams. Just as clay tablets preserved memory for thousands of years, your words here preserve connection across nights and across time. The legacy of Mesopotamia is not a single monument or idea. It is a tapestry woven of writing, numbers, laws, art, and resilience. It is the reminder that humanity has always sought meaning, order, beauty, and justice. As you drift into sleep, let that legacy cradle you, reminding you that even as empires pass, the gifts they leave remain, whispering through time, guiding us still. This is the legacy of Mesopotamia, fragile yet eternal, silent yet resonant, vanished yet alive in every word, number, and thought we carry forward. Sleep now within its story, knowing that you too are part of its unbroken chain. Block 20. Closing reflections and farewell. The rivers have carried us far. From the first villages along the fertile banks, where farmers learned to guide water with their hands, to the rise of Sumer with its cities and ziggurats. From the bold conquests of Akkad and Assyria to the splendor of Babylon and the unity of Persia, from the everyday life of families and artisans to the whispers of astronomers gazing at the heavens. We have walked together through temples and markets, through palaces and battlefields, through workshops and libraries. Now, after this long journey of 20 blocks, we arrive at the stillness of night, where the story rests, and you, too, are invited to rest within it. Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, was the cradle of civilization. Here, humanity first pressed marks into clay, first measured the passage of time, first carved law into stone, first raised towers of brick toward the sky. And yet, beyond these great beginnings, Mesopotamia was also the cradle of something more subtle, the rhythm of human life itself. Families gathering around firelight, children laughing in courtyards, merchants calling in markets, artisans shaping beauty from earth and stone. Their names are lost, but their spirit lingers, carried forward in the memory of civilization. As we look back on this journey, the rise and fall of empires no longer seem like distant, forgotten events. They are part of a larger pattern, a cycle that echoes even today. Creation and destruction, chaos and order, endings and beginnings. No empire endured forever. No king held power without end. Yet from each collapse came renewal, from each silence came song, from each ruin came life. This is the eternal truth of history. Fragility and resilience bound together, loss and hope intertwined. Imagine now that you are lying not in a single city, but upon the plain itself beneath the vast sky of Mesopotamia. Around you stretch the shadows of ziggurats, the faint outlines of walls long fallen, the quiet murmur of rivers flowing as they always have. The stars above shine with the same light that guided the first farmers, the same constellations traced by priests and astronomers. The ground beneath you holds layers of memory, kings and scribes, soldiers and healers, families and children. Their lives are gone, but their presence remains in whispers, in fragments, in echoes that carry forward into the present. You are not separate from them. You are part of their story, as they are part of yours. Take a slow breath. Inhale the memory of writing, the gift of words pressed into clay. Exhale the rhythm of numbers, the gift of time and measure. Inhale the wisdom of laws, the search for fairness. Exhale the beauty of art, the devotion of prayer. Inhale the resilience of families, the tenderness of daily life. Exhale the legacy of empires, their rise and fall, their endless cycle. With each breath, you are carried deeper into calm, deeper into the timelessness of history, deeper into rest. This is where our journey pauses. But stories, like rivers, never truly end. They continue to flow, carrying us onward, shaping us even as we sleep. Mesopotamia is far behind us now, yet its gifts remain with us every day. In the words we write, the hours we measure, the contracts we honor, the beauty we create, the questions we ask when we look up at the stars. Its story is not only ancient, it is alive in each of us. And now, before we close, let me gently remind you one last time. If this 20-block journey has brought you peace, if it has guided you into rest or carried you through the night, I invite you to subscribe to SleepTide Narratives. Press the like button, a quiet gesture that helps this sanctuary of calm reach others who long for rest. And if you are still awake at this final block, leave a comment. Perhaps write, "Still listening," or share which part of Mesopotamia's story carried you deepest into dreams. Your presence here matters. Your words endure. Your companionship makes this journey alive. Rest now. The rivers still flow, the stars still shine, the earth still remembers. Mesopotamia has spoken in whispers, and you have listened. Let its calm linger within you. Let its story cradle you into dreams. Let its legacy accompany you into tomorrow. This is the farewell of Mesopotamia. Not an ending, but a pause, not silence, but a gentle continuation in your own breath, your own heart, your own sleep. Close your eyes, drift gently, rest deeply. Good night.